TikTok, time to rock. We've seen people repeatedly declaring that Hamas was not targeting any civilians. That didn't happen, that the babies weren't killed, that women weren't raped, and so on. And so you just have to keep responding to it because you've got an online mob that runs around saying these things never, ever happened and so on. And these guys weren't targeting civilians and so on. And you just got to respond to this stuff. It's so weird because it's like New Year, so I feel like we should all be excited and stuff, but the topic we're covering is like the most messed up stuff there is, and so, I don't know.
Talking about rapist terrorists.
Yeah, and like some of the most messed up stuff imaginable. These are the guys who are on the opposite side of a fence from you, right? There's a fence between you and these guys. And what do these guys who are right across that fence from you, what do these guys do? They like mutilate and torture people to death while gang raping them. And that's what they want to do. And the entire world is saying, come on, get along with these guys. Why are you going after these guys so hard, Israel? Like, why are you so messed up? Why are you so obsessed with getting these guys on the other side of that fence, who the moment they get on the same side of the fence with you, start torturing and mutilating and raping women to death? Cutting them up, and hammering nails into them and shooting them in their vajayjay. Why are you going after those guys? Come on, ceasefire, tear down the fence, and from the river to the sea, let Hamas be in control. So this, the New York Times posted this a couple days ago, where they actually went and interviewed some people and started looking to see what the evidence is, because there were people denying that Hamas was, of course, targeting civilians, and two, that they were doing various sexual things to women and girls and bodies and so on. All right, let's look at this. At first, she was known simply as the woman in the black dress. In a grainy video, you can see her lying on her back, dress torn, legs spread, vagina exposed. Her face is burned beyond recognition, and her right hand covers her eyes. The video was shot in the early hours of October 8th by a woman searching for a missing friend at the site of the rave in southern Israel, where the day before, Hamas terrorists massacred hundreds of young Israelis. The video went viral with thousands of people responding, desperate to know if the woman in the black dress was their missing friend, sister, or daughter. So this is, the issue was, on the next day, there were tons of people who are still trying to find out if their friend or sister or daughter was still alive. But here you have a woman who'd been horribly burned and was unrecognizable, and you don't know if that's your friend or your sister or your daughter. And so everyone kind of panics. What if that's someone I know? And they couldn't tell who it was. One family knew exactly who she was. Gal Abdush, mother of two from a working class town in central Israel, who disappeared from the rave that night with her husband. As the terrorists closed in on her, trapped on a highway in a line of cars. So let's see what happened to her. As the terrorists closed in on her, trapped on a highway in a line of cars of people trying to flee the party, she sent one final WhatsApp message to her family: "You don't understand." For anyone who doesn't know, Hamas was lined up on the road with Kalashnikovs and so on, and the people driving down the road thought that this is like police checkpoint for something. And so they're driving up to it, and all of a sudden these guys open fire on the cars. Based largely on the video evidence, which was verified by the New York Times, Israeli police officials said they believed that Miss Abdush was raped, and she has become a symbol of the horrors visited upon Israeli women and girls during the October 7th attacks. Israeli officials say that everywhere Hamas terrorists struck, the rave, the military bases along the Gaza border, and the kibbutzim, they brutalized women. A 2-month investigation by the Times uncovered painful new details, establishing that the attacks against women were not isolated events, but part of a broader pattern of gender-based violence on October 7th. So the Times is saying, no, this wasn't some isolated incident. This was a pattern of violence against women on October 7th. Relying on video footage, photographs, GPS data from mobile phones, and interviews with more than 150 people, including witnesses, medical personnel, soldiers, and rape counselors, the Times identified at least 7 locations where Israeli women and girls appear to have been sexually assaulted or mutilated. So 7 different areas of the attack. Here you have a map here of some of the different areas where these attacks were going on. And so it was multiple areas where women and girls were being sexually assaulted and or mutilated. 4 witnesses described in graphic detail seeing women raped and killed at 2 different places along Route 232, the same highway where Miss Abdush's half-naked body was found sprawled on the road at a 3rd location. So women were being raped and killed. So people were on the road and they see areas where women are being raped and killed. And then Miss Abdush was at a 3rd location. And the Times interviewed several soldiers and volunteer medics who together described finding more than 30 bodies of women and girls in and around the rave site and in 2 kibbutzim in a similar state as Mrs. Abdush's, legs spread, clothes torn off, signs of abuse in their genital areas. And when they say signs of abuse in their genital areas, this is pretty bad stuff. This is pretty bad stuff here. And it seems to be an obsession with the jihadis to mutilate the women's genital areas. Keep in mind, these jihadis are people who live on the other side of a fence. So you've got the Israelis, and then there's a fence, sometimes a double fence, and on the other side of that fence, you've got guys who are obsessed with torturing and mutilating and gang raping Jewish women. And the response of the world is, come on, guys, just get along with them. Don't go after them, Israel. Don't go after them, Israel. Don't go after them too hard. Get a couple of them. Even, they killed over 1,000 of your people. So you've more than settled the score. Let them go now. In contrast to Israel, which is saying, no, we're going to hunt these guys down. We're going to kill them for what they did. Many of the accounts are difficult to bear, and the visual evidence is disturbing to see. So there is all kinds of stuff that certain journalists are allowed to see that most people aren't allowed to see. People don't want these images to be made open to the public because, again, there are creepy people out there. Many of the accounts are difficult to bear, and the visual evidence is disturbing to see. The Times viewed photographs of one woman's corpse that emergency responders discovered in the rubble of a besieged kibbutz with dozens of nails driven into her thighs and groin. They hammered dozens of nails into her thighs and groin. Notice, so when you saw that there were signs of abuse of their genital regions, we're thinking like TV shows in America, some bruising or something like that. They're talking about like nails being hammered into the girls. And as we read a little more, again, this is what's messed up. These guys apparently got off on the idea of torturing and mutilating these girls as they're being gang raped. So one guy is raping, the guys are taking turns raping the girl. Other guys are mutilating them. And this is considered a good thing to do. So notice dozens. So if you're saying dozens, you're talking about at least 24. At least 24 nails driven into her thighs and groin. The Times also viewed a video provided by the Israeli military showing 2 dead Israeli soldiers at a base near Gaza who appeared to have been shot directly in their vaginas. So the Hamas guys were shooting women in their vaginas. Hamas has denied Israel's accusations of sexual violence. And of course, there are are some people in the world who would just believe Hamas. But Hamas has denied Israel's accusations of sexual violence. Israeli activists have been outraged that the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres and the agency UN Women did not acknowledge the many accusations until weeks after the attacks. So the UN just wouldn't say much until they were pressured and shamed after weeks into acknowledging that maybe there's something happening there. Investigators with Israel's top national police unit, Lahav 433, have been steadily gathering evidence, but they have not put a number on how many women were raped, saying that most are dead and buried, and that they will never know. No survivors have spoken publicly. So no survivors are speaking publicly about what they experienced. Some are speaking to the media, but they're pointing out most of the people who were actually killed were buried. The Israeli police have acknowledged that during the shock and confusion of October 7th, the deadliest day in Israeli history, they were not focused on collecting semen samples from women's bodies. Again, they're not thinking in terms of, hey, there could be a future trial where we could actually hold these guys to account. And they're not thinking, hey, there are going to be people months down the road who say, no, none of this ever happened, and they would have to prove it. They're thinking, identify these girls and women and get them buried. So weren't focused on collecting semen samples from women's bodies, requesting autopsies, or closely examining crime scenes. At that moment, the authorities said they were intent on repelling Hamas and identifying the dead. A combination of chaos, enormous grief, and Jewish religious duties meant that many bodies were buried as quickly as possible. Again, it's very common among Jews to want if you die, there are many Jews who want you buried by sundown. Most were never examined, and in some cases, like at the rave scene, where more than 360 people were slaughtered in a few hours, the bodies were hauled away by the truckload. That has left the Israeli authorities at a loss to fully explain to families what happened to their loved ones in their final moments. Miss Abdush's relatives, for instance, never received a death certificate. They are still searching for answers. So this woman has been identified. She was buried. Then a person sort of accidentally, while going around looking to see if her friend survived, gets this woman on a video, and that's the indication that the family gets about what actually happened. They're still searching for answers. In cases of widespread sexual violence during a war, it is not unusual to have limited forensic evidence, experts said. Armed conflict is so chaotic, said Adil Haq, a Rutgers law professor and war crimes expert. People are more focused on their safety than on building a criminal case down the road. Very often, he said, sex crime cases will be prosecuted years later on the basis of testimony from victims and witnesses. The eyewitnesses might not even know the name of the victim, he added, but if they can testify as, I saw a woman being raped by this armed group, that can be enough. Screams without words. Sapir, a 24-year-old accountant, has become one of the Israeli police's key witnesses. She does not want to be fully identified, saying she would be hounded for the rest of her life if her last name were revealed. That's actually true. You had the Yazidi survivors. So some of the Yazidi women and girls were forced into sex slavery, and ISIS had it set up kind of like a brothel. They had women in rooms, and the jihadis come and fight, finish fighting for the day, and go into the room and rape these girls. These girls are getting raped by 30 different jihadis a day and so on. Anyway, a lot of these girls survived, moved to different areas, but I read an article a while back about a woman who was a sex slave of ISIS, got away to Canada. So she got refugee status in Canada, and she gets hounded. I mean, all the time, talking trash to her, bragging about what happened to her, saying it's going to happen to her again. And they're just creepy people who really, really love harassing these people. She attended the rave with several friends and provided investigators with graphic testimony. She also spoke to the Times. In a 2-hour interview outside a cafe in southern Israel, she recounted seeing groups of heavily armed gunmen rape and kill at least 5 women. She said that at 8 a.m. on October 7th, she was hiding under the low branches of a bushy tamarisk tree just off Route 232, about 4 miles southwest of the party. She had been shot in the back. She felt faint. She covered herself in dry grass and lay as still as she could. So she was shot. She was bleeding. She covered herself up and hid. But from where she was, she could see what was going on with other people. About 15 meters from her hiding place, she said, she saw motorcycles, cars, and trucks pulling up. She said that she saw about 100 men, most of them dressed in military fatigues and combat boots, a few in dark sweatsuits, getting in and out of the vehicles. She said the men congregated along the road and passed between them assault rifles, grenades, small missiles, and badly wounded women. So notice this isn't far from her. She's still in hiding and about 15 meters away, so very close, there's a bunch of jihadis, about 100, passing around stuff. They're passing around equipment. They're passing around weapons, grenades. Someone had used up all their grenades, needed some more grenades. They're passing those around, and they're passing around badly wounded women. She said it was like an assembly point. The first victim she said she saw was a young woman with copper-colored hair, blood running down her back, pants pushed down to her knees. One man pulled her by the hair and made her bend over. Another penetrated her, Sapir said, and every time she flinched, he plunged a knife into her back. So he's raping her. And every time she flinches, he stabs her. She said she then watched another woman shredded into pieces. While one terrorist raped her, she said, another pulled out a box cutter and sliced off her breast. This is what I was talking about with these guys getting off on mutilating and torturing women and girls while in the process of raping them. One continues to rape her, and the other throws her breast to someone else, and they play with it, throw with it, and it falls on the road. She said the men sliced her face, and then the woman fell out of view. Around the same time, she said, she saw 3 other women raped and terrorists carrying the severed heads of 3 more women. So they're beheading women, raping, beheading. And that's what's going on there. Sapir provided photographs of her hiding place and her wounds. And police officials have stood by her testimony and released a video of her with her face blurred, recounting some of what she saw. Yura Carroll, a 22-year-old security consultant, said she was hiding in the same spot, and he can be seen in one of Sapir's photos. So looks like there were multiple witnesses. He said he and Sapir were part of a group of friends who had met up at the party. In an interview, Mr. Carroll said he barely lifted his head to look at the road, but he also described seeing a woman raped and killed. Since that day, Sapir said she has struggled with a painful rash that spread across her torso, and she can barely sleep, waking up at night, heart pounding, covered in sweat. That day, I became an animal, she said. I was emotionally detached, sharp, just the adrenaline of survival. I looked at all this as if I was photographing them with my eyes, not forgetting any detail. I told myself I should remember everything. That same morning, along Route 232, but in a different location about a mile southwest of the party area, Raz Cohen, a young Israeli who had also attended the rave and had worked recently in the Democratic Republic of Congo training Congolese soldiers, that's the rape capital of the world there, said that he was hiding in a dried up stream bed. It provided some cover from the assailants combing the area and shooting anyone they found, he said in an hour-and-a-half interview in a Tel Aviv restaurant. Gosh, is that the dude? He looks pretty cool. Raz Cohen. Is this Raz Cohen? Guy looks pretty tough. Looks like a special forces guy. Security consultant. Yep, that's him. Hey, this guy looks tough. Maybe 40 yards in front of him, he recalled, a white van pulled up and its doors flew open. 40 yards in front of him, a white van pulled up and its doors flew open. He said he then saw 5 men wearing civilian clothes, all carrying knives and one carrying a hammer, dragging a woman across the ground. She was young, naked, and screaming. They all gather around her, Mr. Cohen said. She's standing up. They start raping her. I saw the men standing in a half circle around her. One penetrates her. She screams. I still remember her voice. Screams without words. Screams without words. Then one of them raises a knife, he said, and they just slaughtered her. Shom Gueda, one of Mr. Cohen's friends and a fashion designer, said the two were hiding together in the stream bed. He said he saw at least 4 men step out of the van and attack the woman, who ended up between their legs. He said that they were talking, giggling, and shouting, and that one of them stabbed her with a knife repeatedly, literally butchering her. Hours later, the first wave of volunteer emergency medical technicians arrived at the rave site. If anyone's wondering why some of this took so long, again, me and AP, we were talking to one of the survivors there. There is a local military base that's meant to guard against Hamas. Hamas conquered the base. They took over the military base and killed all the soldiers there. So the place that is supposed to be the local military security, Hamas beat them and killed them all. Hours later, the first wave of volunteer emergency medical technicians arrived at the rave site. In interviews, 4 of them said that they discovered bodies of dead women with their legs spread and underwear missing, some with their hands tied by rope and zip ties, in the party area, along the road, in the parking area, and in the open fields around the rave site. Jamal Waraki, a volunteer medic with the nonprofit Zaka Emergency Response Team, said he could not get out of his head a young woman in a rawhide vest found between the main stage and the bar. Her hands were tied behind her back, he said. She was bent over, half naked, her underwear rolled down below her knees. Yanan Rivlin, a member of the rave's production team who lost 2 brothers in the attacks, said that after hiding from the killers, he emerged from a ditch and made his way to the parking area east of the party along Route 232, looking for survivors. Near the highway, he said, he found the body of a young woman on her stomach, no pants or underwear, legs spread apart. He said her vagina area appeared to have been sliced open, as if someone tore her apart. Similar discoveries were made in 2 kibbutzim, Birai and Kfar Aza. 8 volunteer medics and 2 Israeli soldiers told the Times that in at least 6 different houses, they had come across a total of at least 24 bodies of women and girls, naked or half naked, some mutilated, others tied up, and often alone. A paramedic in an Israeli commando unit said that he had found the bodies of 2 teenage girls in a room in Birai. One was lying on her side, he said, boxer shorts ripped, bruises by her groin. The other was sprawled on the floor, face down, he said, pajama pants pulled to her knees, bottom exposed, semen smeared on her back. Because his job was to look for survivors, he said, he kept moving and did not document the scene. Neighbors of the 2 girls killed, who were sisters, 13 and 16, said their bodies had been found alone, separated from the rest of their family. The Israeli military allowed the paramedic to speak with reporters on the condition that he not be identified because he serves in an elite unit. Many of the dead were brought to the Shura military base in central Israel for identification. Here, too, witnesses said they saw signs of sexual violence. Shari Mendez, an architect called up as a reserve soldier to help prepare the bodies of female soldiers for burial, said she had seen 4 with signs of sexual violence, including some with a lot of blood in their pelvic areas. Oh, that's a truck with people in body bags. A dentist, Captain Mayan, who worked at the same identification center, said that she had seen at least 10 bodies of female soldiers from Gaza observation posts with signs of sexual violence. Captain Mayan asked to be identified only by her rank and surname because of the sensitivity of the subject. She said she had seen several bodies with cuts in their vaginas and underwear soaked in blood, and one whose fingernails had been pulled out. So notice the fingernails being pulled out. Again, it's raping them while torturing them. The investigation. The Israeli authorities have no shortage of video evidence from the October 7th attacks. They have gathered hours of footage from Hamas body cameras, dash cams, security cameras, and mobile phones showing Hamas terrorists killing civilians. That's weird because I keep hearing from the Dawa guys that these guys didn't kill civilians. Killing civilians and many images of mutilated bodies. But I thought they wouldn't mutilate bodies. I'm confused now. But Moshe Finzi, a deputy superintendent and senior spokesman of Israel's national police, said we have 0 autopsies, 0, making an O with his right hand. In the aftermath of the attack, police officials said forensics examiners were dispatched to the Shura military base to help identify the hundreds of bodies. Israeli officials say around 1,200 people were killed that day. So the forensic examiners are there to identify people, not to do autopsies on exactly what killed these 1,200 people. The examiners worked quickly to give the agonized families of the missing a sense of closure and to determine by a process of elimination who was dead and who was being held hostage in Gaza. Oh, and by the way, that's another big part of it, not just the general Jewish beliefs on having a quick burial. They're also working quickly because they know that some people were dead and some people were taken hostage. And so you know everyone who's missing. So you know everyone who's accounted for because you got families coming, you got families calling in, hey, my daughter's missing. Where is she? Well, you don't know. You don't know if her daughter was killed or if she's hiding somewhere or if she was taken hostage. And so you got to do process of elimination. You have to find everyone. You have to identify everyone who's dead. And then you know who was taken away. So who was dead and who was being held hostage in Gaza. According to Jewish tradition, funerals are held promptly. The result was that many bodies with signs of sexual abuse were put to rest without medical examinations, meaning that potential evidence now lies buried in the ground. International forensics experts said that it would be possible to recover some evidence from the corpses, but that it would be difficult. In other words, if you say, I actually, instead of just burying my daughter, I want to know who raped her. And so I want you examining the body and doing, DNA tests and stuff to find out, get some more information, or to just do an autopsy. That's possible, but just not likely. I mean, really, do you want your, so the question is, would the families of these victims want someone going and digging them up and doing research? It kind of depends. I mean, on the one hand, you just want to say, no, she's already been buried, leave her alone. And on the other hand, you might say, no, if you can get someone, I want you to get him. Mr. Finzi said Israeli security forces were still finding imagery that shows women were brutalized. Sitting at his desk at an imposing police building in Jerusalem, he swiped open his phone, tapped and produced the video of the 2 soldiers shot in the vagina, which he said was recorded by Hamas gunmen and recently recovered by Israeli soldiers. So that actually came from Hamas guys recording themselves shooting women in their vaginas. A colleague sitting next to him, Mirat Ben Meir, a police chief superintendent, said she believed that the brutality against women was a combination of two ferocious forces, the hatred for Jews and the hatred for women. That is a good summary. So, jihadis might hate Jews, jihadis might hate women. What happens when they get Jewish women? Well, they are especially brutal towards Jewish women. Again, I remind everyone, these are the guys who are on the opposite side of a fence from Israelis. And you have people around the world complaining, calling Gaza a prison because Israel has a fence up. Keep in mind, Israel did not control Gaza. Israel had pulled out of Gaza. Israel controls the border between Gaza and Israel, but Gaza also borders Egypt. And so they call it an open air prison because Israel has a fence there. On the other side of the fence are people who want to do this to women. And the whole world's, you're keeping them in a prison by having that fence there. By the way, notice this good summary again. The hatred, two ferocious forces, the hatred for Jews and the hatred for women. Can you think of a religion that sort of combines those two forces? Is there a religion out there that combines those two forces, hatred of Jews and hatred of women? There might be one. I wonder where we might find it. Some emergency medical workers now wish they had documented more of what they saw. In interviews, they said they had moved bodies, cut off zip ties, and cleaned up scenes of carnage. Trying to be respectful to the dead, they inadvertently destroyed evidence. So these guys are, these guys show up on a scene. There's a body, zip ties, tied up and so on. And they're trying to be as respectful as possible. So they want to clean it up. Get the body taken away so the body can be buried. Many volunteers working for Zaka, the emergency response team, are religious Jews and operate under strict rules that command deep respect for the dead. I did not take pictures because we are not allowed to take pictures, said Yossi Landau, a Zaka volunteer. In retrospect, I regret it. So he's saying we are not allowed. We are forbidden from taking pictures of dead bodies. We're not allowed to do it. And he said, I wish I would have done it anyway. There are at least 3 women and 1 man who were sexually assaulted and survived. So these were not killed and not mutilated and tortured to death. These were people who were raped or sexually assaulted, and they survived, according to Gil Horev, a spokesman for Israel's Ministry of Welfare and Social Affairs. None of them has been willing to come physically for treatment, he said. 2 therapists said they were working with a woman who was gang raped at the rave and was in no condition to talk to investigators or reporters. The trauma from sexual assault can be so heavy that sometimes survivors do not speak about it for years, several rape counselors said. Many people are looking for the golden evidence of a woman who will testify about what happened to her, but don't look for that. Don't put this pressure on this woman, said Oret Solitsinu, executive director of the Association of Rape Crisis Centers in Israel. The corpses tell the story. And back to the woman in the black dress. One of the last images of Miss Abdush alive, captured by a security camera mounted on her front door, shows her leaving home with her husband, Nagy, at 2:30 a.m. on October 7th for the rave. He was wearing jeans and a black t-shirt. She was dressed in a short black dress, a black shawl tied around her waist, and combat boots. As she struts out, she takes a swig from a glass. Her brother-in-law remembers it was Red Bull and vodka and laughs. You've got to live life like it's your last moments. That was her motto, her sisters said. At daybreak, hundreds of terrorists closed in on the party from several directions, blocking the highways leading out. The couple jumped into their Audi, dashing off in a string of messages as they moved. We're on the border, Miss Abdush wrote to her family. We're leaving. Explosions. Her husband made his own calls to his family, leaving a final audio message for his brother Nissim at 7:44 a.m. "Take care of the kids," he said. "I love you." Gunshots rang out and the message stopped. That night, Eden Wesley, a car mechanic, drove to the rave site with 3 friends and found Miss Abdush sprawled half naked on the road next to her burned car about 9 miles north of the site. She did not see the body of Mr. Abdush. In other words, they were separated. She saw other burned cars and other bodies and shot videos of several, hoping that they would help people identify missing relatives. Oh, so that's interesting. So some really don't like recording dead bodies. Some recorded the bodies to help people know what had happened, to help people know what happened to their families and friends and relatives and so on. So for identification purposes. When she posted the video of the woman in the black dress on her Instagram story, she was deluged with messages. "Hi, based on your description." Oh, yeah. So everyone wants to know if that's their missing person. "Hi, based on your description of the woman in the black dress, did she have blonde hair?" One message read. "Eden, the woman you just described with the black dress, do you remember the color of her eyes?" Another said. So you just have a kind of grainy image of a woman who'd been burned in a black dress, and then everyone's wondering if that's their missing friend or relative. Some members of the Abdush family saw that video and another version of it filmed by one of Miss Wesley's friends. They immediately suspected that the body was Miss Abdush, and based on the way her body was found, they feared that she might have been raped. But they kept alive a flicker of hope that somehow it wasn't true. The videos caught the eye of Israeli officials as well. Very quickly after October 7th, they began gathering evidence of atrocities. They included footage of Miss Abdush's body in a presentation made to foreign governments and media organizations, using Miss Abdush as a representation of violence committed against women that day. Oh, so that's a screenshot. So that's a screenshot from the video. Can't see a lot there. A week after her body was found, I think this is the end of the article here. A week after her body was found, 3 government social workers appeared at the gate of the family's home in Kiryat Ekron, a small town in central Israel. They broke the news that Miss Abdush, 34, had been found dead. But the only document the family received was a 1-page form letter from Israel's president, Isaac Herzog, expressing his condolences and sending a hug. The body of Mr. Abdush, 35, was identified 2 days after his wife's. It was badly burned, and investigators determined who he was based on a DNA sample and his wedding ring. The couple had been together since they were teenagers. To the family, it seems only yesterday that Mr. Abdush was heading off to work to fix water heaters, a bag of tools slung over his shoulder, and Miss Abdush was cooking up mashed potatoes and schnitzel for their 2 sons, Eliav, 10, and Raphael, 7. The boys are now orphans. They were sleeping over at an aunt's the night their parents were killed. Miss Abdush's mother and father have applied for permanent custody, and everyone is chipping in to help. Night after night, Miss Abdush's mother, Eti Braka, lies in bed with the boys. So this is Grandma. Miss Abdush's mother, Eti Braka, lies in bed with the boys until they drift off. A few weeks ago, she said she tried to quietly leave their bedroom when the younger boy, so that's the 7-year-old, when the younger boy stopped her. "Grandma," he said, "I want to ask you a question." "Honey," she said, "you can ask me anything." "Grandma, how did Mom die?" Well, not a question you can answer. Not until he's older. So these are the parents. So these are the parents who are taking care of the kids. All right. So that's what I wanted to cover before the end of the year. So maybe next year won't suck so bad. All right, what's everyone's thoughts on this so far? So here's the thing. You've still got the Dawa guys defending Hamas, even if they won't openly defend Hamas. It's clear that's what they're actually doing. But you've got the Dawa guys, and they're still denying that Hamas was attacking civilians. Remember, what's the guy from Five Pillars? Dilly Hussein on Piers Morgan. Pierce asks Dilly Hussein, who runs a UK Muslim media organization, Five Pillars UK. And Pierce asks him to define terrorism. And Dilly says his definition. He says, terrorism is when you're targeting civilians. And then Pierce says, well, based on that definition, then Hamas are terrorists because they did that. And then Dilly actually started grinning, saying, do you really believe that? Do you really believe that? Like, you're such an idiot for believing that Hamas was targeting civilians. And notice, so you got one, the idea that they were targeting civilians. So people who weren't military. Were they killing? In other words, the 1,200 people killed, were these all military personnel? No. They were mostly civilians. So that's why they come up with conspiracy theories. No, it was actually the IDF that went and killed them and so on. But anyway, so that you've got one, you've got the idea that they were targeting civilians. And two, you got the issue that they were actually raping women. And then three, that they're actually mutilating and torturing women. And what's creepy is for the people who, for the Dawa guys and their fans and lots of their fans around the world, lots of moronic college students and so on, I don't trust any of the information. Right? So you could say, okay, look, here's this woman's image is caught on this video here. What's up with that? No, that was probably the IDF did that to her afterwards, just to make it look bad, to make what the innocent Hamas did to make it look even worse. And so notice in those situations, they've kind of got the same issue as Hamas, right? Like they hate Israel so much that they won't even listen. They won't even consider evidence seriously. And so this is what, again, guys, get your minds around the big picture here. Big picture. You've got Israel and a fence, and then Gaza. And within Gaza, there are people who don't want to kill anyone. There are people who wouldn't mutilate women and girls. What kind of people are signing on with Hamas? People who want to do this stuff. And even though there are people who don't support Hamas, there are videos of people in Gaza who are complaining about Hamas and so on. The majority of people voted for Hamas when they had an opportunity in 2005 to vote for their leaders, to vote for who's going to represent them. They voted for Hamas. And so they voted for people who really, really want to do this to Jews. Again, guys, it's just imagine you had a neighbor who that's what he wants to do to your wife and your daughter. You probably want to take some serious measures to make sure that guy can never do that. All right, suppose you have a population with hundreds or thousands of people who want to do that to your wives and daughters, and they're just on the other side of that fence. You'd probably want to make sure they don't have an opportunity to do that. And yet people around the world, shame on the Jews for keeping these guys in an open air prison. What do you mean by open air prison? Well, they got a big fence there between Israel and these guys, and they don't let people cross that fence without going through a checkpoint. And so it's a prison, even though they've got another border with Egypt. But it's got a fence. So, lots of prisons have fences. There's a fence there. So it's an open air prison. Okay. Why are these guys let's grant the terminology. Why are these guys in an open air prison? Oh, because there are a bunch of people there who really, really, really are obsessed with torturing and mutilating and raping and gang raping women and girls. Well, I don't know. If there were any group in the world that you'd want to protect your girls from, Sounds like these guys. Sounds like these guys will be on the top of the list. So that's the situation. Anyway. Oh, people are I'm looking at the comments now. People are pointing out civilians participated. Yeah, you had Hamas once they had gone through the barriers and checkpoints and so on. Yeah, there were other people who went in to loot and so on. So they, yeah, it was. It wasn't just Hamas jihadis. It was civilians going in to do stuff as well. But again, you got plenty of people who are shooting women who, so it was clear that Hamas jihadis were the perpetrators of quite a bit of this. What really sucks is, like, you can't just say it, point it out, and then move forward, because there will be people forever who deny that this happened. What happened on October 7th? Well, some freedom fighters tried to break out of their open air prison that they've been locked in with no reason. No reason for having these guys behind a fence. But they broke out of their open air prison for freedom. And they were eventually stopped. And then the IDF moved in and mutilated a bunch of people and killed their own people and so on to make it look bad, so that they could justify their war going in. There are people who will be saying that for years. And so, as much as it sucks, we just have to periodically remind ourselves of what happened and what the evidence is. And New York Times, I have to say, doesn't seem to be much of a friend to Israel. So the fact that they're reporting on it seems, and after a 2-month investigation, seems like you're kind of weird if you think none of this stuff happened. Waited for you, couldn't bear to read it. Yeah. I mean, that's a messed up article. That's a messed up article. When you're reading about women having a breast cut off while a guy's gang raping her, or a guy raping a woman, and then every time she flinches, he plunges a knife into her again. And then, of course, hammering dozens of nails into a woman's thighs, women being shot in the vagina and so on. Not like it actually boggles my mind. Why do you want a fence between you and these guys? So that's notice that's before, and that's even now. There's the what do you need this fence? You're making it a prison. You're making it a prison. And then even beyond that, well, why are you still going after these guys, Israel? Why are you going so hard after Hamas? Why are you hunting these guys down? Why are you doing it? Why not just have a ceasefire? You've already done a lot of damage. Why don't you just let the rest of the guys go? But by the way, they still have hostages. But even apart from the hostages, why are you still trying to hunt down the guys that did all this stuff? Why not just give them a free pass? Gosh, people are lunatics, man. If only the people listened and got a pen pal. I hope JP understands better now. Yeah. Ongoing problem. This is true of atheists. This is true of Christians. This is true of Muslims. This is true of everyone. We have the group that we're a part of and the people around us, and it keeps us from realizing what certain other people are actually like. And so what I mean here is, if you're a Christian and you go to school and you have some Muslim friends at your school, you think, hey, I get along with these Muslim friends. Hey, there's a fine. And so you don't really understand the mentality of someone like Hamas. And you tend to think, they're just a little angry, a little ticked off. They got some disagreements with Israel and so on, not realizing how radically different they are from anything you were thinking. Similar with atheists. One of the big problems with the new atheism is you got, Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens. And these guys are sitting around smoking cigars, sipping on champagne, and they're like, hey man, we're atheists and we're fine. We don't need any of this God stuff, and we're pretty good. We're pretty good here. Why don't we if we just got religion, everyone would be like us? And I don't realize, no, everyone would not be like you. Everyone would not be like you. It doesn't work like that. Get it, or get your minds around the issue that not everyone is like the people you're familiar with. There's some very, very different people in the world. And yeah, and so here with JP, It's a reference to JP's famous message to Muslim videos where he was telling, he was thinking that he could really solve the problems and bring about world peace if Muslims would get a pen pal. If Sunnis would get a Shia pen pal, and then get a Christian pen pal, and then get a Jewish pen pal, and then everyone's hearts are going to melt and there will be world peace. Keep in mind, I'm not opposing the idea of trying to listen to other people or trying to correspond with other people. It's just when you realize what you're actually dealing with out there, you start to think maybe pen pal isn't the solution that you think it is, JP. Sarah says, I know Mo allows raping slaves taken as war booty, but is there a passage where he allows it before they're enslaved? Muslims should at least oppose that. Yeah, to be fair, I think you can make a case that Hamas is doing things they're not supposed to. You can make a claim that ISIS shouldn't have been dealing with their sex captives in the way they were. I mean, it's messed up. It's messed up what you're actually allowed to do from an Islamic perspective. And I mean, you can find passages in the Muslim sources about mutilating people and torturing and so on. But to tie it all together in that way to where you're, gang raping a woman or a girl and hammering nail, it seems like you could actually, as a Muslim, even as a radical Muslim, I don't mean like people who don't even believe in some of these sources. I mean, you could be a diehard jihadi and still think, no, we're not supposed to be doing this. We're just not supposed to be doing some of this stuff here. But the real reason this response doesn't work very well is that at the end of the day, it's the same with the Dawa guys. Notice if you're a Dawa guy and you're actually crushing it, you're going out there, you're crushing it, you're crushing the kuffar and so on, you can get away with pretty much anything. I mean, look at Sheikh Uthman. I mean, he indisputably faked a hate crime against himself. Should have been completely the humiliation of the entire ummah. They didn't care a bit. They didn't care even slightly. He's still their hero. Then he committed adultery with his friend's wife and married a girl who was already still married because she's an American convert and it's a status symbol. So he married a girl who's married to his friend. The friend sent her to Sheikh Uthman for marital counseling because they're having some problems, and Sheikh Uthman bangs her. How much trouble is Sheikh Uthman in? Zero. They do not care. So you have this idea, as long as you're doing what's important, we're going to let you slide on all this other stuff. Guess what? If you're a jihadi going out there doing it, this is the attitude of ISIS, this is the attitude of Hamas, and so on. It's, hey, you're going to die as a martyr fighting the kuffar. You got a clean slate. So if you're crossing some lines because you're enraged at these people, Allah's going to be fine with that. Doesn't that suck that that's the world we live in? That you've got guys who hammer nails into a woman as they're raping her. Guys who will cut off a woman's breast as they're raping her. Most people don't want to talk about this stuff or think about it. And yet the Dawa guys make you, because after the jihadis do it, then the Dawa guys say it never happened. And now you have to actually be saying, okay, let's talk about this. When you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to talk about this stuff. Aren't there like pretty much anything in the universe that would be better to be talking about? And yet, welcome to what Islam does to us. SK says, I don't have a lick of sympathy for Palestine anymore. And that's something, just so everyone knows, I have a slight cold. My voice actually held up better than I thought it would, as I'm out of cough drops. But that's an ongoing issue where, guys, you could be sympathetic towards the Palestinians, because as revolting as you might find Hamas, and as revolting as you might find the people who voted them into power, there were people who didn't approve and who didn't vote for them and who don't want them and who would just love to live normal lives, and they don't want to slaughter all the Jews. There are people there who don't want any of that. There are Christians in Gaza and in the West Bank. And so you do, and you, even for the people who really hate Jews and so on, you could kind of get your mind around that. Like I could sit here and think, hey, if I were born in Gaza, and let's suppose an Israeli rocket strike, even if the rocket strike is in response to something Hamas would do. So Hamas would launch a rocket at Israel. Israel has a system where, okay, if a rocket is fired out of Gaza, they have a system in place that will follow the trajectory, send a rocket right back to hit the spot where it was launched from. So Hamas would do what? Hamas would launch these from areas, next to schools and so on, hoping that a bunch of civilians get killed when Israel launches its missile back at them. But notice, if I were raised in Gaza and I was a 10-year-old and one of those rockets comes back and injures me and kills my family and so on, I could understand growing up and being enraged. So the point is, you can think of the Palestinians. You can think, hey, I want what's best for them. But yeah, when there comes a point where people are starting to think, okay, Israel, you just got to do what you got to do, and you have to get Hamas, and anyone who's standing in your way, you still have to get Hamas. And I lots of people are going to be like that. I no sympathy for anyone as far as and that's kind of messed up, because again, there are people there who want nothing to do with this, who have no part of this, but that's what they're doing. And so it's kind of a messed up situation that Hamas is actually damaging their own cause here. Because if people stop sympathizing and just say, oh my goodness, no patience for this stuff anymore. Now, what do you do? Because that's all that kind of keeps Hamas going, is people sending billions of dollars in aid to these guys. Genuine question: when you see news like this, do you feel angry, sad, etc., or is it just intellectual? It's intellectual, but it kind of has the same effect. So with me, it's God created people in his image, and it's not just the woman that's being raped and tortured who is created in the image of God. It's the guys who are gang raping her and torturing her. They're created in the image of God. We're all created in the image of God. We have certain responsibilities. Image God means we're supposed to be imaging God in the world. We're supposed to be somehow reflecting God in the world. And in order for us to reflect the image of God, we have to have certain abilities. And so God gives us these abilities with which we can reflect God's nature in the world. And what do we use it for? Well, we gang rape and torture women. And so it's, on the one hand, it's, look how this woman who's created in the image of God, look what these guys are doing her. But at the same time, look at what these guys who are created in the image of God are doing. And it's just, so it's, look how messed up this is. Look at what we've been given and what we actually do with it. And it's weird, because what do you do with that, right? On the one hand, you want to like grab the guys and choke them and so on. And at the same time, so anyways, it's like a combination of things. Let's look what you're doing this woman. Look at what you guys have become. Look at your ideology and your beliefs, that they do this to you. And it's like everything is designed to warp and twist the image of God in the world. And that pisses me off. It pisses me off. So yes, free Palestinians from Israel, Islam, and Hamas. Yeah, I would agree. You got to, but there is not much of a way forward when you have guys who are doing the stuff we just read about in charge of Gaza. So jihadis are ethnically cleansing Nigerian Christians, but Israelis are not ethnically cleansing Palestinians. They are both ethnic cleansing. Fact. No. If you look at how many times have we been through this? if you look at the population of Palestinians in Gaza has been exploding. No pun intended. It's been growing rapidly. It's been growing rapidly. Going after, notice, okay, suppose Nigerian Christians were launching a ton of terrorist attacks against the rest of Nigeria, right? Suppose Nigerian Christians were constantly launching terrorist attacks against the rest of Nigeria. And then the terrorists, the Nigerian terrorist Christians, then went and hid among the civilian Christian Nigerians. And then the rest of Nigeria said, we have to get the terrorists, but the terrorists are hiding among the rest of the civilian Nigerian Christians. And then the military went in to find these guys, and some civilians got caught in the crossfire. Would that be an ethnic cleansing? No, that wouldn't. That would be targeting terrorists. That would be trying to eliminate terrorists to keep them from launching terrorist attacks. That seems to be what's going on in Gaza. The jihadis in Nigeria they want to wipe out Christians of Nigeria, or at least completely violently subjugate them. But you can't be a Christian living on your own and not be subjugated in Nigeria, according to these guys. That's what they're aiming for. You can say and make a case, Israel shouldn't be doing that. Oh, Israel should have been more careful there. Oh, Israel should have been more careful with that bomb. You could say all these, but it's not the same thing. It's just not. Stop embarrassing yourself. Far4 says, if you make a new channel, will it have a new name? Yes. Yes. Matter of fact, I can say they will eventually target this. They will eventually target the channel. I will burn it to the ground or go to another channel. I just found out it's way easier. It's way easier. No, I mean, the moment you get away from them constantly attacking your channel, it seems like it's got to be shadow banging, because if I can go to a completely new channel, start over with a fraction of the subscribers, and get even more views on a video, that means they were doing something to kind of hold you back on the other one. So I'd rather just play kind of musical channels. I'd rather play musical channels than constantly be fighting with a bunch of morons on the YouTube Trust and Safety team who they don't like you criticizing terrorism. That might hurt someone's feelings. Shut up, YouTube. Bunch of morons. I'm talking historically, not just recent stuff as Hamas. It is a historical ethnic cleanse. Dude, this is completely idiotic. No, it isn't. Go back and watch some of the live streams where we went through this stuff. Yes, if you listen to what a bunch of morons say, if you listen to what a bunch of morons tell you about what happened with Israel and Palestine, yeah, you could call that an ethnic cleansing. If you look at what actually happened, I have no clue how you could describe that as an ethnic cleansing. And if you did want to call it an ethnic cleansing, every battle over anything would pretty much be ethnic cleansing. So, my goodness, Egyptian Prince still here. Debate a Mina Christian or on Palestinian ethnic cleansing. I know and have studied the history well. No, you haven't. You sound like a dope. What has happened to Palestinians is 100 times worse than what Nigerian Christians have gone through. Stop, dude, stop. Just stop embarrassing yourself. Again, if Israel is ethnically cleansing or genociding or whatever you want to say, the Palestinians, they are the worst in history at it because the population has been exploding for decades. You have to say they are the complete, utter, total worst at it. With that said, I completely understand people not liking what Israel's doing. I completely understand, because I know it seems to be more common for Palestinian Christians to not like Israel than to like them. I've met people on both sides. I've met Palestinian Christians who side with Israel. I've met Palestinian Christians who are against Israel. It seems more common for Palestinian Christians to be against Israel. And I can understand if I were part of a group and there's another group right beside me and they're massively more powerful. And anytime someone on my side does something, even if it's got nothing to do with me, these guys can start lobbing bombs over here. I understand being ticked off at them. So I understand that. Just it's the idea that, again, once you say genocide or ethnic, it's like there need to be some standards for using terms like this, or it just becomes you can apply it to anyone. You can say, oh, we were ethnically cleansing the Germans when we bombed them. We were ethnically cleansing them. We were ethnically cleansing the Japanese during World War II. We're ethnically cleansing all of them. And then a more reasonable comment from Egyptian Prince. Anyway, I pray and hope for peace. God bless. Peace. Yes. Same for me, Egyptian Prince. I'm not. I said as soon as this started, I said Israel's going to do some messed up stuff. Other Palestinians are going to do messed up stuff, not just Hamas. But I see zero way forward for anyone when a group like Hamas that wants to treat women like that have political power. I don't see any way forward. So whatever else happens, if you ever want any sort of peace, you have to get rid of people like Hamas.